You guys made it. Last session of the day. Congratulations. We're in the final stretch. Our next speaker today is one of the most inspirational and strongest women I know. Dr. Rachel Graham has been described by the New York Times as the aquatic Jane Goodall. She grew up in Tunisia and has lived all over Africa and Latin America. And even as a child, she was a champion for the less charismatic species, often bringing home snakes, lizards, and even the occasional scorpion. Rachel's love for the environment led her to pursue a degree in zoology from Oxford, and then a PhD from the University of York in the UK, studying whale sharks and fish spawning aggregations. And since then, she's dedicated her career to the conservation of big fish and their habitats. In 2011, Rachel won the prestigious Whitley Award for her work on community-based conservation work on sharks in Mesoamerica. And in 2014, she founded MarAlliance, an international NGO dedicated to the conservation of marine megafauna around the world. When she's not saving sharks, Rachel is busy raising and feeding two very tall teenage boys in Panama, both of whom are avid naturalists. So please welcome me please join me in welcoming Dr. Rachel Graham.
Lovely, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for staying for the marine session. Woohoo! I want to talk to you this afternoon a little bit about transformative moments. We've all had them. They're incredibly important. They're the things that actually create a dogleg in our life. And sometimes we were chugging along in one direction, and the next thing you know, you've done a dogleg and you're doing something absolutely different. In fact, Jane Goodall last night was talking to us about how, as a 4.5-year-old child, she watched a chicken lay an egg. And that, for her, set her on the path of science, wildlife conservation, and more. And she had a very supportive mother, actually. It was a great story because she had been missing, waiting for this chicken to lay an egg for 4.5 hours. And her mother was very worried about her, but did not castigate her, and listened to that story with great support. And look where that got Jane Goodall. I have to say, my mother's done very much the same thing for me. So this is one of the transformative moments that I have now on a regular basis. The first time I had this was in 1990, swimming with over 50 gray reef sharks in Sinai Peninsula. This happens to be in Roatan, Honduras. But every single time I get to swim with the top predators in the sea, it really shifts something inside me, and I connect with nature. And this is something that you see with a lot of people, the yearning to connect with nature. I love this meme because it says everything that you need to know about the PR with sharks. Unfortunately, sharks, as you know, have really bad PR and public relations. And so we really need to do a lot to reverse that. And the reason we need to do that is because we are seeing massive declines in shark populations. I'm just showing you the head of an endangered scalloped hammerhead, which is one of the most fished sharks out there, and just one of the infographics that's been generated by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. And the two takeaways here are that the vulnerable, endangered, and critical categories for these animals account for 24% of the assessed species of sharks and rays, which right now are about 1,038 species. What does this mean? This means that 24% of these species are now vulnerable to extinction or more. And what's even worse is that that entire gray part of the pie, 47%, we don't even have enough data to determine what's going on with those species. So we have a lot of work to do. We have at least 3.7 million fishing vessels in the world. So next time you eat seafood, think about how much fishing effort there is going on. And one of the reasons I mention this is because why are we having such declines in shark populations? Why are they in such critically bad state? Because a lot of these animals, for those who may not know, don't reach sexual maturity, the larger ones, until they're at least 10, 15 years old. With a whale shark, 25 or 30. With a Greenland shark, 150 years old. And many of them have a gestation period for at least a year, if not 2 years, with some species. And then they have a reproductive pause. So they cannot keep up with the fishing effort that you're seeing. I show this large mothership with some of the side ships just to say that this is one way that fish and sharks in particular are being fished. And they are being fished very heavily. So a lot of folks think that the major demand for shark is actually due to the fin trade in Asia. It is a key demand. But the biggest threat to sharks is just from fishing, overfishing. And that overfishing takes many forms. You see a whale shark there with the basket of tuna. So when you eat tuna, there's all kinds of bycatch that's coming with it. And it might include manta rays or whale sharks even. You see the fins from the whale shark there too. They are all part of the fin trade, but it's not for food. It's usually as a status symbol and a banner for restaurants. A set of fins can reach $15,000 in cost. And manta rays now are being sought after for their gill rakers. So what they manage to breathe through, those are being taken from their bodies and dried and used as a tonic in Chinese traditional medicine. But it's never been proven that they actually work. But I really want to focus on the small-scale fisheries. They constitute the majority of fisheries in the world, and these are the traditional fishers that we mainly work with. We don't have the scope and breadth to do everything at my organization, MarAlliance. We don't have the scope and breadth to work with the big boats, all species of sharks and rays, which now number over 1,250 species. But we can work in some key areas where we can have a key impact, mainly with small-scale traditional fishers who are really trying to survive either sustenance or small-scale commercial fisheries. And they do have an impact, a very, very large impact, especially on coastal sharks. The majority of all those species that I mentioned are actually coastal in nature. 50% of them are coastal in nature. So that is really where we're working, is on the interface of that coastal area, shallow coastal seas, and mainly in coral reef coastal communities. We're discovering more and more that people are pulling in species that they never expected to pull in, such as stingrays. A lot of people have seen them in kind of tourism sites, etc., but these form the basis of fisheries in countless countries, especially in Central America where I work. El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, even Belize, Mexico, and more. And some of the products that are derived from the sharks and the rays are not only for consumption in the communities themselves, but they actually go to meet another form of demand that a lot of people may not be aware of, and that is religion. So during the Catholic Lenten season, people really want to eat fish. They're not allowed to eat red meat. They feel like they are doing better duty in their Catholicism, and therefore they will eat fish. What is the fish with the largest fillet? Usually shark or ray. So we've seen that, unfortunately, religion has taken a big impact, or has made a big impact on sharks and rays as well. And I wanted to bring all of this to your attention because a lot of folks think that the fin trade is really one of the drivers for the decline in sharks. And I just want to bring home the fact that it's overfishing. Overfishing, overfishing, overfishing on all levels, at all scales, in all countries. And that there are other areas where sharks are being used, which a lot of people don't realize, like your fish and chips. Actually, they did some DNA barcoding of fish and chips, for example, in Britain and also in Australia, etc., and they found that a lot of fish and chips are actually made up of endangered species. But they've been kind of smuggled into the fish and chips under the batter and such. So little did we know that with our mushy peas, we are eating endangered species. Your pets, our pets, I didn't know until recently, conducted by a colleague of mine, Mr. Cardeñoso, that our pet foods also contain shark. They're not even labeled on the pet food food labels. And if you're thinking of trying to boost your joints, a lot of people go to chondroitin sulfate and other such products that are derived by sharks. And your lipsticks may be containing squalene, which come from the oil of livers and sharks as well. So these are some new locations that we're seeing shark products being pulled from. So you think with all of this demand, these 3.7 million fishing vessels, huge amount of seafood consumed, how do we make a difference for sharks? How do we do it? So one of the first things that we determined was that a lot of people don't even realize that they're eating shark. That dried fish that I showed that is being required for Lenten season, people don't even know they're eating shark when they're eating that dried fish. So a lot of it is going out, doing these public perception surveys, having focus group discussions across multiple countries, meeting with the public, raising awareness. That's really been a huge first step that we've done. And what comes back from that is knowledge about what people's perceptions are. How scared are they of sharks? How much do they want to support conservation more? And what we found was that I'd say half of all people surveyed, we had these perception surveys throughout Central America, half of them are still scared of sharks. In fact, a lot of people are quite terrified of them. I don't know why. I think they're quite cuddly myself. But they're almost all in favor of their conservation. And they've seen so much on TV now. They've seen the decline in these populations that they want to see something done. So we took what they suggested to us, and we started creating campaigns. And our first big campaign is in Honduras, which is the first shark sanctuary in all of Latin America. Unfortunately, most of the people didn't know it. So it was created by a top-down approach, and what we're doing is we're underpinning it from the bottom again and trying to raise awareness so that we can meet them in the middle. Everything from malls and airports and everything, we're trying to inspire the wonder and awe that we've all had in transformative moments when we've actually been with sharks. And we want to show that these animals are not the bloodthirsty killers that so many people still think that they are throughout the tropics. This is a tiger shark that we've named Kalema after a wonderful band in the eastern tropical Atlantic. Beautiful female swimming away there with her satellite tag on her fin. This allows us to determine where she is whenever she comes up to the surface, and that satellite tag transmits her position. This shows a colleague of mine, Zeddy Simo, who is letting her go into the deep. And the reason I'm showing you Kalema is not only does she inspire wonder and awe, but she also helps to fill in the gaps and makes us understand that we need to work together regionally and globally for certain species. And so this is Kalema's path. So for example, she started, let me see if I can do this. Oh, here we go. So she started up in Cape Verde, 10 islands off the coast of West Africa near Senegal. She didn't transmit for quite some time. She started transmitting near the Mid-Atlantic Trench, and then she had a really lovely route down towards Brazil, a few caipirinhas, probably met a really nice fella, then back again, had a second thought, maybe more caipirinhas over here. I mean, that's what I would do. And then made her way steadily back up towards West Africa. We happen to know that this is an area, because we've been tracking a lot of the fishing activity, where you have a lot of long-lining and purse seine netters. So either the battery on her transmitter died, or perhaps she got caught. But what she has given us is the first ever instance of transatlantic movement of a tiger shark and then back again, showing that we really must work together between the East and Western Atlantic for this particular species. So how And so just to mention with that, we not only work at the community level, we are also trying to bring some of the data that we've got from this really cool science up to the policy level as well. And this is really important. So we take what we do in the communities, we train a lot of the fishers that we work with in these communities in science and research, and we help also build their voice so that they can be an active participant in decision making and also feed into policy making. Because traditional fishers in almost all tropical countries have an incredibly strong voice. But a lot of the time, they don't understand how science is done or why science is done. So we are trying to change that throughout countries like Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, Panama, Cape Verde, Micronesia. And we're also, through the work that we do with them, including them in the science and the research and the long-term monitoring of these species, they are having their own transformative moments. So they are going from guys who would normally kill these animals without a second thought to, oh my God, my mandate now is to keep them alive at all costs. I have to keep these alive. Zé Luis Montero before, for folks who've been here before, might know him. He used to be a shark fisher. Wouldn't think twice about dispatching shark. But now he is the voice for shark conservation amongst fishers in many of Cabo Verde's islands, and even has the ear of the president now. So that's how you build those voices, you create those links, you facilitate and enable those links. And Choka, he's a new fisher on our team. He's amazing, and he now loves sharks. But just a love of sharks and a changing of attitude is not going to put food on your table. So the other thing that we try and do is we try and create economic alternatives with the fishers, either with them being part of our team or some of the work that we do in terms of monitoring, or we're looking at a whole range of other economic alternatives, seaweed growing and wool. And it's very, very important that all of this gets spread horizontally. So once I've trained folks, I remove myself from the picture, and they take the lead. They're going to listen a lot more to folks in their own communities than they are to me. And this has been an incredibly wonderful way of galvanizing communities for the conservation, not just of sharks, but also we work with turtles and big finfish. And this is really important, because what we're seeing across all the communities we're working in is a massive decline, not only in the number of predatory fish, so the sharks and rays, but also the big fin fish. So the tunas and the barracudas and the jacks and such, and we're left with really small, low fish low on the food chain. And one of the key reasons is because a lot of people are using unsustainable fishing gears. So, for example, in Belize, we've formed a coalition where we're now trying to move all fishers away from nets to declare what would be the first national ban on nets in an entire country. So we're looking forward to that, and it's looking very positive. And where we can, we move people over to other species. Very important. So keep them away from nets, keep them away from sharks, start eating species like the invasive lionfish, Pterois volitans. Delicious. If you see it in a restaurant, please order it, please eat it. Eat as many as you can. But don't get stung by them. It'll make you cry, or worse. Very important to this is also bringing in women and children, and especially young women. So we are looking to work more and more with not just fishermen, but fishermen's daughters. Because daddies love their daughters. And if the daughters say, but Dad, why are you bringing home these species? You know they're endangered. We have potentially a greater opportunity to reduce threats to some of our endangered species that we're studying. And not only that, we're really trying to raise the capacities and level of schooling for a lot of the young women in the communities and the countries where we work in. This is Ana Batista. She's our young research officer in Panama, working with one of the very few female fishers in one of the ports where we work. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about how we also meet transformative moments or make transformative moments happen to the broader public. So you have those big displays in airports, et cetera, but that's not necessarily meeting the communities or meeting folks in the communities. So what we've started doing is bringing VR to fishers, decision makers, and other folks in the communities, including leaders. And so in a partnership with Steve Mandel and Oceans 360, as well as Rick Miskiv and 22 Degrees, we've had really great success so far. And I just want to share with you, this is some of the VR filming that I did. Some of you may have seen it outside. So we found that they're absolutely incredible. We can't take everybody out with us. Not everybody can be part of those hands-on transformative moments, but we found that VR is actually can accelerate those connections with nature. So we're expanding that program readily across multiple countries where we work. And I just want to end with a little story because I know my time is up. Every person counts when we're talking about fishing, overfishing, species, and more. And you wonder who this fellow might be. This is Mauricio White. He always laughs about his last name. He is a taxi driver that I befriended in Panama City. And of course, I chatted to him every time I'd go off to the airport about sharks, and he'd ask a lot of questions. And so on the last trip in the taxi coming here, he said, "Hey, I want to tell you, I caught some hammerheads." I said, "You did?" He said, "Yes." He took his hands off the wheel, which scared the bejesus out of me. And he showed me how big they were. They were about the size of the wheel, actually. And I nearly keeled over. I was so excited because that meant that he had found a brand new shark nursery that we knew nothing about for endangered scalloped hammerheads in a part of Panama we had never guessed. And he said, when I said, "Well, what did you do with the hammerheads after you caught them?" I don't castigate anybody. I just like, "So what did you do?" And he said, with a big smile, "I let them go." And I was so impressed. And he said, "I want to know how I can do more of this, how I can rope my fishing buddies in, because we're really excited that we found the babies and we want to keep the babies alive." And this is just to show you how incredibly cute they are. So I told you that they're cuddly, right? Yeah. So if you never thought that sharks were cuddly, anyway, so it takes all of us, every single one of us on our team. That's what we're doing, trying to spread the love, get the message out, identify local talent, nurture that talent, and just move horizontally with this message. And that is one of the key ways that we're trying to reverse declines in sharks and rays in particular sites, in particular countries where we work. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rachel. We've got a couple minutes for questions from the audience.
Hi, Dr. Grimm. Thank you for the talk. So you mentioned that a lot of the products that we use daily might contain shark products. So what are some ways we can avoid these products if we don't know if they're not on the label?
So I think one of the things that needs to happen next is you can actually contact generally some of the top pet food providers and cosmetics providers and say, "I really hope that you do not include shark and ray products in your products." So that would be one start. So coming from the consumer, that's very, very powerful. Though I'm looking forward to a list being released of who all of those pet food and cosmetic products are, so that then we can actually target that approach. So stand by, and yeah, we'll try and get that out into another newsletter.
Hi. Hello? Oh, there it is. Do we know what caused the lack in transmission between the tagging and the first transmission?
So that lack of transmission, we're not entirely sure. It could be, so what happens when sharks are tagged first, they usually go to ground or go deep, as we say, for a certain period of time. That was a long period of time. Now, the other thing too is that is when weather gets really rough in the Atlantic. So she was tagged in the latter part of October, and then it starts getting really nasty. And for that tag to transmit, you really need to have alignments of planets and satellites and not too much wave activity and so on and so forth. So that could be one of the reasons.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Hi. So you talked about how you're trying to ban, like the unnecessary and unsustainable fishing nets. So what kind of alternatives are you trying to implement that will be more sustainable for the fishing industry?
So we have a very special situation in Belize where we have 2,500 fishers. And really, when we did a big survey of all the fishers, we're very lucky that really only 88 had registered for nets. So 88 were using disproportionate amount of effort compared to the 2,400 and I guess 18 other fishers in the country. So we came together as a coalition, and some of our coalition members are really powerful fundraisers, even far better than I am, and they've pulled together a very large fund. And so for some, it will be moving them into economic alternative livelihoods. For others, it'll be buyouts. And for others, it might be an incentive or sustained stipend for especially the older fishers who really will not be able to transition to anything else. So Belize is a very special example, but if we can manage it there, it'll be a really great seed program for a lot of other projects. But it will require external funding for success.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you. Yeah, I am. Okay. Do you wanna hold this? Wait, I'm back. Okay, so I have to take my glasses off because I'm just at that age where my eyes are a little bit funky. So I get the great pleasure of introducing one of my favorite people, Pablo Borboroglu, Poppy. And sorry if I'm using my phone, but I can't remember everything. So you are coming to us from Patagonia, Argentina, where he has lived for 31 years. This wonderful doctor in penguins actually originally wanted to be an ambassador. And he had actually studied law until he went to Patagonia and had his own transformative moment. And it was an epiphany with penguins. So some of us do sharks, others penguins. But that meant that he went for a dog leg in life, and he moved into a PhD, which I like to call a pauper HD. You don't go into it for getting rich. The cool thing is, we both won Whitley Awards, so we consider ourselves to be Whitley brothers and sisters, and but I'm older than he is, so I boss him around. And I did want to say that in 2016, we were very fortunate to be taken on as partners with WCN. So we kind of opened up the oceans world here in WCN. We're really happy about that. Thank you to WCN. And so I'm not going to talk any more about his other particular transformative moments. I just want to say, welcome, Poppy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rachel. Can you hear me well? Okay, so hello, everybody. It is such a pleasure to be with all of you again. And as you can see, thank you so much for staying with us. As you can see, we are the last talk of the day. So basically, it's like being the last dish on the menu. So I would say you are having penguins as dessert, right? So, you know that this year we are celebrating many special things for us because this is the 10th anniversary year of the Global Penguin Society. So in a more personal level, it is also important because I'm going to be 50 in a few weeks. And the most important part is that, as Rachel said, I spent 30 years of my life working on penguin conservation. So what started out as a dream to work on penguin conservation was growing stronger and became a reality. And in 30 years, we have been able to benefit 1.6 million penguins worldwide. And it has been the accumulation of baby steps, because acre by acre, we have been protecting millions of acres of penguin habitat. And all of these have been only possible thanks to this powerful and fantastic partnership with amazing supporters like you. So thank you very much. So let's dive into the penguin world. I want to show you how difficult it is right now to be a penguin on this planet. What are the problems they are facing, and what are we doing exactly to help them? And penguins can be seen as ocean sentinels because due to their features, they reflect very well the conditions of the coasts, but also the health of the oceans. And the oceans are critical for the existence of this planet because, for example, they provide oxygen and also provide food, and they regulate the weather of the entire planet. So I want to tell you some particular features because penguins, due to these characteristics, they are particularly vulnerable to the main threats the oceans are facing. First of all, when they are on land, penguins breed in colonies. So in one moment of the year, they are all together in one place. So they are more vulnerable to particularly threats like introduced predators on an island, for example. On the other hand, penguins, they only lay 1 or 2 eggs per year. So if those eggs are lost, they lost the breeding the complete year. And for example, a king penguin takes 15 months to raise only 1 chick. And in addition, penguins, they swim hundreds and thousands of kilometers in the ocean when they are feeding, looking for food, and also when they are migrating. So they explore vast areas of the oceans. But if I ask you, what do you think is the main feature of penguins? One idea? Need help? So penguins do not fly, right? Well, except the ones that practice hang gliding. So, because they lost the ability to fly millions of years ago in order to improve the ability to dive, because that helped them to avoid competition with other animals and have more access to food. So I want you to introduce you the monster penguin. This is the digital recreation of a real penguin that lived in New Zealand 65 million years ago. The fossil of this guy was recently found in New Zealand, and it had 5 feet tall and weighed 170 pounds. So, of course, a bird like this could not fly, but it was a fantastic diver. The problem is that not flying was a great advantage many million years ago, but now became a problem for penguins because they're more exposed to some threats. And the issue with penguins is that they are facing threats when they are in the ocean, but also when they are on land, because they accumulate threats in both environments. And this is what is making populations decline. So the oceans are in trouble, and so are penguins. And 55% of the 18 species of penguins are considered threatened by IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. And this is because 5 species are listed as endangered, 5 others as vulnerable, 3 as near threatened, and the last 5 as least concern. But there is a common wrong perception that penguins are doing okay, and they're not doing okay. Some species, for example, are in deep trouble. Yes. So like the yellow-eyed penguin, for example, the global population is 1,700 pairs. They only live in New Zealand, and they are declining. The African penguin population collapsed from 1 million 100 years ago to 21,000 pairs now. And of course, the Galapagos penguin population, this is the rarest penguin species, is less than 2,000 pairs now. So to help penguins address these threats, we created the Global Penguin Society, which is the first and only international organization dedicated exclusively to the conservation of penguins. So to show you an example of part of our work, I want to show you this video. This is a new video. There, thank you. Over half of the 18 species of penguins that exist in this planet are considered threatened. Penguins are very sensitive to all the alterations in their habitats. When the chicks, for example, are small, their food should be close to the colonies. But climate change is changing that, so they have to swim further. And by the time they come back, the chicks are dead. In the ocean, they are affected by marine pollution and fisheries. And when they come on land, they are affected by human disturbance and also the illegal traffic of penguins. I have a special connection with penguins for a long time. The first person that ever told me about something that was called a penguin was my grandmother, and that was very special for me. And then when I was 18 years old and I visited a big penguin colony for the first time, I felt that connection. So I realized that I wanted to make a change. The colony of Pedrazi is kind of special in our work of 30 years. We discovered this colony 10 years ago. It had only 6 pairs of nests. The place was a complete mess. So we decided to help address these major threats through science, management, and education activities. And now the colony is almost 1,900 pairs. At the beginning, we were working with the local kids because that's very important. But at some point, we decided that we needed to reach global community. We are reaching millions of kids from all over the planet, online, from one of the most remote places on Earth.
Work in science and education is very necessary to change the behavior of people. In the future, the children are the people that can do something to take care of the ocean and the penguins.
Our goal is to foster a conservation culture through the penguins. In terms of science, we will study 3 penguin species in New Zealand, in Chile, and in Argentina. In terms of management, we're going to work with governments, other NGOs and landowners to promote the creation of marine national parks. So far, we were able to protect over 8 million acres of land and ocean. When you work through penguins and the international community, you can protect big environments and many other species that coexist with the penguins. It's about passion, it's about energy. You have to inspire people. Thank you. Thank you very much. So this is a video that was presented this year because we were very lucky and honored to receive the Rolex Award for Enterprise for our work in Global Penguin Society. So thank you very much. So as our name indicates, we are global and we have different activities in 16 countries. In some countries we have our own representatives, and in some other cases we work with partners. And we work at different scales because penguins, they have global problems, but we also need to work at local scales. At a higher level, we created the IUCN Penguin Specialist Group that represents a high level of scientific rigor and credibility with regards to the conservation of penguins and has impact on international and national policy. Another example is that we have been recently included as a member of the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy, which is led by 14 prime ministers and presidents that are committed to develop solutions for ocean health. And at a lower level, I want to share with you this good news because last December, after working with the government of Argentina and many other NGOs, we were able to designate 2 national marine parks in the south extreme of South America, and they sum up 100,000 square kilometers, and it is very important penguin habitat for penguins. And, you know, as Rachel mentioned, fisheries are a big issue for many marine wildlife. And as you saw in the video, penguins are facing many threats. And fisheries have removed enormous number of fish, of prey species for penguins. One of the problems is they compete for food with the penguins because they fish in the same areas where the penguins are feeding. But the other problem with the penguins and the fisheries is that the fisheries cause direct mortality. Penguins die because they get caught in their nets. And I want to show you these very sad pictures where you can see a group of fishermen that they are having fun showing the penguins, dead penguins that died in their nets. So not everybody loves and respects penguins as we think they do. The other big problem now for the penguins is that plastic, as you know, is an emerging issue. Every single year, 8 to 9 million tons of plastics are discarded in the ocean. This is a picture taken in one of the beaches where we live in Patagonia, which is supposed to be one of the most pristine areas on Earth. Most of the things, you see lots of plastics there. Most of the black things are black plastic boxes that are discarded by the fishing boats in the ocean. And we also find pieces of nets that are drifting away and killing many wildlife, you know? And this is how plastics are impacting penguins. This is what we find. This is a Magellanic penguin with a plastic bottle around the neck, and it was very difficult for him to dive and also to get food. And in this case, we see a juvenile with a piece of a plastic bag, and when we found him, he could hardly breathe. So I want to show you how these threats are impacting the individual lives of penguins. This is Clarita. She's a female, and she was the mother of the first chick ever hatched, the very first chick that hatched in this colony that we discovered 11 years ago, and the same colony that you saw in the video. So as you can see, Clarita is incubating an egg, one of the eggs, and at the same time, she's got a very big plastic bottle in the back of the nest, and she was surrounded by a lot of plastics. In our studies, we follow many penguins, and we follow her for all her life. Clarita had a partner he was Honorio, and they bred together for 8 years, and they raised 7 fantastic chicks. But 2 years ago, Honorio never came back after a winter migration. So we waited, and we think he died, and we think he died as a victim of the fisheries. So what do we do to help them? As part of our research project, we track the penguins and to find out where are they when we don't see them, and to find out the feeding routes. With this information, for example, we want to work with the government to create a marine protected area to reduce the impact of the fisheries in the feeding grounds, and also to expand the protection on land to minimize the human disturbance when penguins are breeding. And other activity that we do is we organize cleanup campaigns, engaging kids and adolescents and communities removing plastics from penguin habitat. We want to replicate this in the 3 tips of the world: South America, South Africa, and Oceania, Australia and New Zealand. And a big part of this activity will be supported by Disney Nature, thanks to the revenues of the Penguins movie that was released last April. And these funds are going to be helpful for us to conduct research and also conservation. So we are very grateful for this support. So it is very important for us to remove the plastics, but also to avoid more plastic pollutions. And we are conducting multiple actions to increase awareness about this big issue that is affecting not only penguins, but all of us. So now I want you to leave Luján. She's going to explain more about these activities, and I'll be back later.
Thanks, Poppy. Hello to everybody. I am Luján. I am a marine biologist, and I manage the educational program of Global Penguin Society. One of the main activities that we do is to give talks to children at primary school about penguins and the conservation problems they face in their habitat. After that, we take them to visit the penguin colony. Some of them, this is the first time that they can see the ocean and the penguins. So far, we have taken over 6,000 kids to see penguins. And our goal is to make children understand the importance of protecting the oceans. Sorry, as you can see in this picture, There are the kids looking the penguins. This year, in the 10th anniversary of Global Penguin Society, we launched our educational program for kindergartens in order to give a conservation message from an early age. We think that it's very important because these kids in the future are protecting the oceans. We elaborate educational material such as different types of books. Also, we elaborate booklets such as Messenger of the Sea that we distribute for free in 5 Spanish-speaking countries where penguins live. This year, we elaborate together with Disney Company an educational kit in English and Spanish to reach global audiences of kids. As was mentioned before, we organized the 5th edition of the activity Cleaning the House of the Penguin. You can see this image, the beach before and after the cleanup. And the key goal of this activity is to raise awareness in the community about the negative effects of the plastic pollution in the ocean due to the human activities. In addition, this year we have developed a campaign to reduce the single-use plastic in beach resorts, and which it was very successful. So we are planning now to include more beach resorts to this program. So we believe that the problem of the plastic pollution in the ocean should be addressed from its origin. Yes. Well, I am so happy to sharing with you, our work with you, and thank you for your attention.
So as a closing line, I just want to say that, as you can see, penguins are facing many threats in all the southern hemisphere. And when you support the Global Penguin Society, you are helping many penguins like Clarita, the female, and also her chicks. But you are also supporting many other wildlife that coexist with the penguins. And you are contributing to the livelihoods of thousands of people that depend on ecotourism based on penguins. So if you support us, you are helping penguins, the ocean, and the entire planet. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Papi. We've got a couple minutes for questions from the audience.
Yes, I know.
Any questions? All right, we've got one in the front.
So I was wondering what the conservation status is of some of the, like with the African penguins, they've also had problems with the oil spills besides overfishing. And I think some other areas have also had oil spills. So that you didn't really get into that one, but at least for South Africa, I believe that's a major threat.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So the African penguin is a critical case because there were 1 million penguins 100 years ago, but then they collected 8 million eggs for consumption. Then there was a big issue with the oil spills during 40 years. Then there was overfishing, and now climate change. So the population has not been able to recover. And with the oil spills were a big issue in South Africa and also in South America, in many countries where the judiciary is not independent from the executive powers, you know, and so the justice is not working very well. And the thing is that those problems were caused mainly by chronic pollution, you know, many oil spills that are small, unreported, and very frequent, not like huge, massive accidents. In Africa, there were massive accidents as well. But now we are seeing that the oil pollution has been, you know, there was a reduction in the impact of oil pollution because a lot of laws have been implemented and enforced properly. But now we are seeing that pollution globally, not only for penguins, for all seabirds, is declining, and we are having these new emerging issues with pollution through plastics.
Doing better because there are no people? Is the South Georgia population of penguins doing better because of no people being there?
Yeah, great point. You know, when you look at the global, at all the penguins that are doing better are the ones that have large population and live in Antarctica or in subantarctic areas because they live far away from people, you know. South Georgia had a problem, like in many islands, that they had introduced rats. The introduced predators is an issue for most penguins because they evolved in the southern hemisphere because the northern hemisphere had a lot of more predators. So penguins for millions of years, they could they could afford not flying because there were no predators to catch them. But now, with colonization, we took a lot of predators, accidentally or on purpose. And there were rats. New Zealand, you know, I mean, there were no mammals in New Zealand except a little bat. And now there are 70 million possums. They eat all kinds of birds, including penguin chicks. And so there are a lot of campaigns to remove predators from many islands. And in many cases, they are very successful, very expensive as well. I mean, I think in South Georgia, it was like $15 to $20 million, I think, yeah.
One last one. Hi, I may have missed this before, but how long naturally do they live without facing these challenges? What's the lifespan of a penguin? And like, they must mate for life, and how many chicks can they have throughout their lifetime?
Great. Yeah. So it depends on the species. Like one of the most, oldest ones is a Magellanic penguin. They can live up to 35 years. Adelie penguin, the one that is, if you see the movie, have you seen the, if you've seen the movie Penguins, it's about an Adelie penguin in Antarctica. They live between 20 and 25 years old. They are very territorial, so they tend to come back and breed with the same partner. And like with some projects that they've been able to follow couples, they bred together for 17 years. Yeah, so the thing is that they tend to come back. Of course, they get divorced. You know, the main reason of the divorce is when they don't get to breed chicks alive. So the next season, they will try to mate with somebody else, some other partner, to increase the chances of raising chicks alive, which is their goal, you know, basically. Yeah, but they're long-life animals. Yeah. Okay.
Rain happening in areas where typically there was more snow, and I thought that there was chicks that were having problems with rain versus snow, and I was just wondering what kind of shorter or longer term solutions, or is it a huge impact? Is that killing off chicks in mass numbers, or is this kind of a temporary, hopefully, weather situation?
Yeah, absolutely. So climate change, the thing is that for millions of years, the moments where penguins breed, they have been forced during millions of years. So when the chicks hatch, it is the moment of big availability of food close to the colonies, you know, because the parents, they have to swim, get food close to the colony, and feed the chicks very frequently. Climate change is changing the distribution of food. So food is far away from the colonies, as I explained in the video, you know. So that is one of the ways climate change is impacting them, because they're swimming further, it's taking longer for them to come back, and many times the chicks are dead or they die, and that is causing the decline. Climate change is also increasing the frequency and the severity of storms, like you mentioned, you know. And there are some studies, that in particularly areas, when those storms occur when the chicks are small. And in some storms, we lost half of the chicks in the colony, you know, in one season. And some other thing that we are, you know, studying right now, we are having an increase in heat waves, you know, in Patagonia and in many places. Many colleagues are studying this issue. It's not only that it's hot for a long time. Like in one of the colonies in Patagonia, this January, we had 44 degrees in one of the penguin colonies, and at least 250 healthy penguins died in one afternoon because they reach a lethal temperature in the nest. They never leave the nest. They never leave the chicks or the eggs. But when they reach the lethal temperature, they say, I have to leave because I will die. Some nests are 1 kilometer far away from the coast. So imagine, at this height, there is no oxygen. So they die on the way from heart attacks. So this is one of the effects, collateral effects of climate change effects.
Thank you so much, Poppy.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for being part of our expo today. Please consider supporting some or all of the wonderful conservationists you saw on stage today. WCN seems very big, but most of these guys are working at a really grassroots level, so any support you can provide makes a difference. Just a couple really quick closing announcements. Please save the date, April 25th, which will be our Spring Expo down in Redwood City, and October 10th for our next Fall Expo, which will very likely be in a much larger venue, so get excited. And one last announcement, if you've parked in the garage, if you exit before 6:45, your parking will be free. Good night, everyone.